Hello, greetings to everybody. I hope all of you are doing fine. So we will now proceed with the second installment of our online lecture on the transport of water and minerals throughout the plant. So in the first part of our video, we studied the absorption of water and minerals at the roots. That's step 1 in the transport of substances throughout the plant. So we shall now proceed with step 2. Step 2 is capillary action in the stem. So the capillary action in the stem involves several mechanisms. So we have what we call cohesion and adhesion. So when we speak of cohesion, cohesion is the attraction of like molecules. Polar molecules like water tend to stick together with hydrogen bonds. So if you will recall, water being polar has an oxygen end which is partially negative, and it has a hydrogen end which is partially positive. So the negative end of one water molecule is attracted to the positive end of another water molecule through hydrogen bonding. And this makes the water molecules stick together. And another mechanism involved in capillary action is adhesion. Adhesion is the attraction of unlike molecules. Like water molecules tend to be attracted to the walls of the xylem. Water molecules tend to stick together to polar surfaces. Now, because of these two mechanisms, cohesion and adhesion, what happens here is that cohesion and adhesion causes water to crawl up narrow tubes like in the xylem. And the narrower the tube, the higher the same mass of water can climb. So that is the principle behind capillary action. But in spite of the fact that water crawls up these narrow tubes like the xylem due to cohesion and adhesion, there is a limit. Okay, because gravity comes into the picture, and the maximum height wherein water can crawl up through capillary action is only 32 feet. Now, in spite of the fact that the maximum height of capillary action is 32 feet, how can a plant like the sequoia redwood can transport water? We know that the sequoia redwood of California has a height of 300 feet. So how is that possible that the sequoia redwood can transport water up to 300 feet? So there's an explanation for that, and this is the so-called cohesion tension theory. Now, in the cohesion tension theory, cohesion between water molecules create a water chain effect. And as the molecules are removed from the column by evaporation in the leaf, more are drawn up. Alright, so everybody kindly take a look at this animation. So you could see here water molecules in the water column inside the xylem vessel. And these water molecules are attracted to each other by cohesion. So we mentioned that the negative end of one water molecule is attracted to the positive end of another water molecule. So these water molecules form a chain due to cohesive attraction of the molecules. Now, in the leaf, there is evaporation of water. Water is converted into gas. And as the water is converted into gas, the adjacent water molecules are being pulled up, as you could see in this animation. So as the adjacent water molecules are pulled upward, the entire water column also is pulled upward. So that is the so-called cohesion tension theory. So in the leaf, there is evaporation. So as the water is converted into gas in the leaf, the adjacent water molecules are being pulled upwards. So the entire water column also moves upwards up to the roots. See? So there is a decrease in pressure inside the xylem, and that causes the entire water column to be pulled upwards. So that is the so-called cohesion tension theory. Now, to summarize the process involved in the cohesion tension theory, let's take a look at the following concepts. So in the cohesion tension theory, again, we have to take note that cohesion between water molecules replaces water by pulling the next water molecule up the stem. Remember, in the leaf, there is evaporation of water. And as water is converted into gas, the adjacent water molecules replaces the water that has been evaporated. So this will pull the next water molecule up the stem. Remember, these water molecules are attracted to each other by hydrogen bonding. And as the column of water is hard to break, this pull is felt down the entire column of water to the roots. And as each water molecule is pulled from the xylem, another water molecule is pulled up from the roots. Alright? This pulling force is passed from water molecule to water molecule all the way down the plant. Alright? And this is how water is pulled up through the plant by transpiration. So, even though capillary action has a limit of only 32 feet, cohesion tension theory will continue to pull water molecules up to 300 feet in the case of the sequoia redwood. Alright, so these water molecules again are attracted by hydrogen bonding through cohesion, and also these water molecules are attracted to the walls of the xylem by adhesion. So cohesion and adhesion will work together in order to transport water molecules upwards. Alright? To compensate on the limit, transpiration converts water into gas, and as the water molecules are converted into gas, the adjacent water molecules replaces those that have been evaporated, and this will pull the entire water column upwards up to the roots. So this is felt up to the roots of the plant. Alright, so that is the cohesion tension theory. Alright, so before we continue, probably let's try to answer this question. If the forces of cohesion tension theory move water up a stem, what happens to water pressure at the roots? Will that affect water moving into the roots? So just comment down below to answer this question. So before we continue, let's watch this video about the transport of water up the stem. Alright, let's watch this.
Hello and welcome to a video about water transport in a plant. To start off with, what happens is the water evaporates from the stoma. We might have known this as a stomata. The stomata is the plural. And so water vapor moves by diffusion out of the stoma. Before it diffuses out of there, it needs to evaporate from the cells. So some evaporation is happening here, and that is where the water leaves the cells in the spongy mesophyll and evaporates into an air space. Now, evaporating means that the water potential in these cells here is going to lower. So there's going to be a lower water potential. We can use the symbol for water potential in these cells. At least it's going to be lower compared to the water potential in the xylem. And so water's going to move from where it's higher to where it's lower, and that's going to move by osmosis. This osmosis means that there's now a tension going down here. You'll remember that all the water molecules have cohesion, they have hydrogen bonds, which mean they stick together very well, and there's also tension. This tension is formed because as the water moves out by osmosis, we get a negative pressure at the top of the xylem. And this cohesion between the molecules and the tension formed by the negative pressure gives us the cohesion tension theory, the theory as to how water moves up the plant. And there's some evidence for that theory that we will discuss in a different video, but that is how water moves up a plant.
Alright, so I hope that video had helped you gain more insight in the transport of water up the stem through cohesion tension theory. And again, please comment down below to answer this question. If the forces of cohesion tension theory move water up a stem, what happens to water pressure at the roots? Will this affect water moving into the roots? So please comment down below for your answers. Alright? Okay, so I guess we can now proceed to step 3. Step 3 is evaporation. And evaporation at the surface of the leaf keeps the water column moving, as we mentioned earlier. And this is the strongest force involved in transpiration. Alright? And as we learned a while ago, transpiration, evaporation of water to the leaf, produces negative pressure. So there's a decrease in pressure inside the leaf and in the xylem. Transpiration produces negative pressure, that's tension, in the leaf, which exerts a pulling force on water in the xylem, pulling the entire water column upwards. Alright? So as you could see in this animation, water in the leaf evaporates. Water is converted into gas. So the adjacent water molecules replaces those water molecules that have evaporated, and this will pull the entire water column up, and this is felt up to the roots. Now, the transpiration of water, the evaporation of water, is controlled by the stomata. The stomata help regulate the rate of transpiration. Leaves generally have broad surface areas and high surface to volume ratios. And these characteristics increase photosynthesis, and this will also increase water loss through the stomata. Alright, so the water evaporates and escapes through the stomata. The stomata is one of the major pathways for water loss. In fact, about 95% of the water a plant loses escapes through the stomata. So the stomata regulates this water loss. And the guard cells in the stomata control the diameter of the stomata by changing shape. Alright, so the stomata opens and closes. And the opening and closing of the stomata has something to do with the changing shape of the guard cells. So if the stomata is open, or the stomata opens with light and the guard cells are filled with water, and the stomata closes without light and the stomata closes when the guard cells are lacking water or dehydrated. Now the question is, why is it important to have stomata open? Alright, so everybody, can you take a look at this photo micrograph of the stomata that is closed, and the other one, the stomata is open. Alright, so water escapes through the stomata. Alright, so the stomata opens if the guard cells are filled with water, and the stomata is closed when the stomata lacks water or the guard cells are dehydrated. Also, in the presence of light, the stomata opens, and in the dark, the stomata closes. Alright, so again, why is it important to have the stomata open? The answer is simple, for gas exchange. Okay, for photosynthesis so that carbon dioxide can enter the leaf. When the stomata are open, gas exchange occurs. And this is important for photosynthesis. Oxygen can diffuse out and carbon dioxide can diffuse in. That's the reason why it is important for the stomata to open. Water can also evaporate, and this will trigger the movement of water from the roots to the stem and to the leaves. Alright, so it is important for the stomata to open. Okay, so gas exchange can occur. Now, at this point, let us now study the mechanisms involved in the opening and closing of the stomata. Now, osmosis plays an important role in the opening and closing of the stomata. Now, how does osmosis determine if the stomata are open or closed? Now, everybody kindly take a look at this illustration. So, water diffuses through osmosis into the guard cells, and this causes the guard cells to open. Alright? So, on hot dry conditions, the guard cells will have less water in them. So, the guard cells are dehydrated, they tend to relax, and this will close the stomata. So, as you could see in the following illustration, so water enters the guard cells through osmosis. The stomata opens up. But in dry conditions, these guard cells tend to lack water, they tend to relax, so the stomata closes. And the entry and exit of potassium ions will create either a hypotonic or hypertonic conditions, and through osmosis, this will also affect the opening and closing of the stomata. So everybody kindly take a look at this. So in the first illustration here, the potassium ions moves out of the guard cells. So as the potassium ions moves out of the guard cells, the tendency is for water also to move out, and this will close the stomata. Now look at the second illustration below. Potassium ions enters the guard cells, so water also tends to move in. So the guard cells opens up the stomata. Alright? So again, that is osmosis due to hypertonic and hypotonic conditions of the guard cells with the entry and exit of potassium ions. Alright? So that's how the stomata opens and closes. Changes in turgor pressure open and close the stomata. These result primarily from the reversible uptake and loss of potassium ions by the guard cells. So as you could see, as the potassium ions leave the guard cells, water also moves out, and this will close the stomata. Now, when potassium ions enter, water also moves in, and this will open the stomata. Alright? So, when water enters the guard cells become turgid and the stomata opens up. Now, when these guard cells are flaccid due to lack of water, the stomata closes. Alright, and the entry and exit of potassium ions creates either a hypertonic or hypotonic condition that will result in the movement of water in and out of the stomata. So the role of potassium ions is important in the opening and closing of the stomata. So when the stomata are open, evaporation draws water out of the leaf. Gas exchange can also occur so that photosynthesis can continue, and also the transport of water up through the cohesion tension explanation. Now when the stomata are closed, evaporation cannot occur, nor can gas exchange. So photosynthesis and transpiration slows down. And again, what is the driving force for the stomatal opening? So as we mentioned earlier, the driving force that allows the opening and closing of the stomata are the potassium ion fluxes. When the potassium ions are in the guard cells, water also flows in the guard cells. And because of osmosis, the stomata opens up. Alright? Now what about closure of the stomata? The stomatal pores closes when excessive water loss occurs. This happens when the potassium ions are out of the guard cells. Water also flows out of the guard cells, and because of osmosis, the stomata closes. Alright? And what is the importance of the chloroplast within the guard cells in the stomatal movements? So photosynthesis can also take place in the guard cells too, since they contain chloroplast. In contrast to the subsidiary cells, this activity is related to the rise of osmotic value, thus also the opening of the stomata. Alright, how does carbon dioxide affect stomatal movement? So a low concentration of carbon dioxide causes the stomata to open, so take note of that. A high concentration leads to their closing. Now what about temperature? How does temperature affect stomatal movement? So with a normal range of 10 degrees Celsius to 25 degrees Celsius, changes in temperature have little effect on the stomata. But as temperatures get higher than 30 degrees to 35 degrees Celsius, this will lead to the closure of the stomata. An increase in temperature leads to an increase in respiration, and this increases concentration of carbon dioxide. Now what about light? How does light affect stomatal movements? Light affects stomata indirectly through the decrease in carbon dioxide through photosynthesis. Now in addition, light quality may directly affect the guard cells. Blue light stimulates the uptake of potassium ions, so the stomata opens in the early morning and dappled shade. Alright? Okay, capillary action, transpiration. So as we mentioned before, cohesion and adhesion draws water up through the process of capillary action. Water travels from the roots up to the stem and throughout the leaves through the xylem. And water will then enter the guard cells. Water then evaporates to the atmosphere through transpiration. Alright, so I hope everything is clear, but before that, let's mention the effects of transpiration. So if the water is not replaced by sufficient transport of water, the plant will dehydrate, will lose water and wilt. Also results in evaporative cooling, which can lower the temperature of a leaf and prevents denaturation of various enzymes involved in photosynthesis and other processes. Alright, so before we continue, let's watch this video about the stomatal opening and closing. Let's watch this.
So we know all about the xylem and the phloem, but now we need to know exactly how water and minerals move around the plant. You should already know about the structure of the leaf, but if not, watch this video to remind you. Let's have a look at transpiration and the xylem. Transpiration is the evaporation of water from the aerial parts of the plant, so the leaves and stems. By water evaporating out of these parts, mostly the leaves, a suction pressure is created which draws up the water through the plant. This is called the transpiration pull. But what exactly happens in transpiration? Let's start at the roots. Roots have root hairs, giving them a large surface area for water absorption. Water passes in from the soil by osmosis, passing down the concentration gradient and into the root hair cell's cytoplasm, and then onto the xylem vessels. Water moves through the xylem vessels from the root to the stem to the leaf. Transpiration at the leaf causes a transpiration pull, and because water molecules are cohesive, water is pulled up through the plant in the transpiration stream. As well as the leaf cells needing water for photosynthesis, water also keeps the cells turgid, which supports the plant. Inside the leaves, water is drawn out of the xylem cells to replace the water lost through transpiration. Because of the cohesive nature of water, which also pulls the water through the plant, as water leaves the xylem and moves into the leaf, it again pulls more water molecules behind it. But it isn't just about water. The transpiration stream also transports mineral ions that are dissolved in the water from the roots to the leaves. The transpiration rate isn't constant. There are many different factors that affect it. The environmental factors are similar to those that make you sweaty. The temperature, the humidity, but also wind and light intensity. Then there are also physical factors, like does it have a waxy cuticle? How many stomata does it have? The nature of the guard cells, how large is the leaf surface area, and if the leaf is folded or flat. If the rate of transpiration increases, then the rate of water absorption by the roots needs to increase too. When water is scarce, or if the roots are damaged, the plant needs to reduce its transpiration rate by closing some of their stomata. There are guard cells on either side of the stomata, which regulate this. During daylight hours, chloroplasts produce sugar. This lowers the water potential of the guard cells, and they take in water by osmosis. This makes the guard cells turgid. Because the guard cells have a different cell wall thickness, when turgid, they bend more on the outside into sausage shapes. This opens the stomata, or the pore. Water can then be lost. During the night, all the sugar produced by the chloroplasts gets used up, so the water potential of the guard cells increases. More water, less sugar. The guard cells lose water by osmosis and become flaccid, and the stomata starts to close. This reduces water loss. So you now know about water movement through the plant, up the xylem, and pulled along the transpiration stream by the transpiration pull. And unsurprisingly, the plant has methods to control water loss by closing the stomata, based upon how flaccid or turgid the guard cells are. So in the final part of this video, we are going to look at the movement of glucose. After all, water may be important, but so is food.